Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Authoritarian series here on Into the Weeds. Today, we are continuing to dig into Doge. This is part two of the Doge series. So let's get straight into it. I know that Phil has a couple of things that he wants to talk about, and then maybe at the end of this video, we'll kind of wrap up and give a summary of everything that we know and we don't know about Doge. Go ahead and start us off there, Mr. Phil.
Okay, and so I want to go ahead and start off with something that Jubal and I had talked about in a the last episode, and that was the idea of like what do principled recognition resignations mean? That is that noise or is that a signal? Um, and so the reason I bring this up in the context of this video is that from the recording, our last recording to now, one of the things that happened is that 20 people who had been assigned to Doge resigned their positions. Um, these are people who were part of what was called the U.S. Digital Service. And so when it was renamed and included in President Trump's executive order, they were one of the people who were, they were some of the people who were detailed to Doge to work on that. And what they said in the letter, I'm just going to summarize part of it, is they pointed out that they had left senior private sector technology positions to go ahead and pursue nonpartisan public service. Um, but they said that when they were first interviewed, people who remained unidentified came in and asked them a bunch of questions about their political loyalty. And they felt that that was very troubling. They said that one third of the U.S. Digital Service employees were indiscriminately fired. And from their perspective, they said the sudden loss of their technological expertise make critical systems in America's data less safe. And then I'll just finish the last thing they said, and I'm quoting their letter. We swore to serve the American people and uphold our oath to the Constitution across presidential administrations. However, it has become clear that we can no longer honor those commitments at the United States Doge service. And so I wanted to bring that up because I wanted to sort of, I don't know if you had heard about this ahead before, but whether or not that represents a cause for concern for you. I do want to point out that um, Elon Musk responded on X saying that these are Democratic political holdovers who refuse to return to the office. I haven't seen anything substantiating that, but I did want to go ahead and let you know what Musk had said in response. So my question to you, Jubal, is that noise or is that a signal?
So this brings to mind the conversation that we had about the two attorneys in the Southern District in New York with the Eric Adams case, right?
Correct.
And I think that we had come to the conclusion that that when somebody walks off the job, a principled, what did you call it? A principled
Principal resignations.
resignation, right? A principled resignation. That certainly can be a signal. That if somebody who is let's say, a Republican leaves a Republican agency because they think that something is going wrong, or a Democrat leaves a Democrat agency, that certainly has more is more concerning than if a Democrat leaves a Republican controlled office or vice versa, right?
Right.
So that begs the question: Are these principled resignations, right?
Right.
Which requires some kind of knowledge of who these folks are that are walking off the job. uh 20 people out of an entire department doesn't seem like a huge number. And again, if the claim of Musk is that, well, these are guys that were here since Obama, or they're Democrat holdovers, and they're not on board with what's happening, given the status of the project, that is a credible assessment. But
Except that
that may
he
or may not
doesn't.
be true. But
Right, that's the thing, is he doesn't provide any evidence of that. I don't know how he would know that. And
right,
they explicitly say identify themselves as being nonpartisan and explicitly say, as do many bureaucrats,
Hmm.
that their job is to go ahead and um, administer the policies of the existing administration. That's what the very beginning they
Hmm.
point out. We left senior private sector technology positions to pursue nonpartisan public service,
Hmm.
right? And to me, like if somebody's going to counter that, then I want to know what evidence. But just posting something on X doesn't mean it isn't sufficient to me. It's costless for Musk to say that. For
Sure.
them, what they did was costly. They gave up jobs. These are people who presumably are making way less in the public sector than they were making in the private sector. And they did this, um, according to what they say, out of
Hmm.
service to the country. The other thing that I point out is that they were detailed to Doge
Hmm.
from the very beginning. It wasn't like they instantly resigned. It wasn't as soon as
Right.
they were
Right.
that. It was when things started to happen that
Hmm.
they thought were troubling. And in particular, if anybody goes looks up, you'll be able to find this letter. What they're particularly concerned is what's happening to America's data and what they view as compromising the systems. You and I talked last time, and we essentially agreed that transparency is better, and that
Hmm.
you sort of felt Trump had been, Doge had been transparent. I'm not sure I agree. As a matter of fact, there's a recent court case where this judge, ha- these labor unions sued over some of the firing at various agencies, and the judge is now allowing them to do discovery, having representatives from Doge come in and testify under oath
Hmm.
about what they're doing. It's not so much about the final outcome of like their proposal that they make, is how are they coming about it? If they're being arbitrary and capricious, which is sort of the standard in the APA, that you can't just fire somebody arbitrarily or capriciously, then that's going to represent a problem as far as following the law. So, anyways, so I just wanted to get that out there. I think that by my way of looking at things, they haven't been transparent about their process. Um, and we know that they've made mistakes in terms of the cuts they propose. The last thing I'll say, and I'll give you the final word on this, is I think people should understand, if it's not understood, that you can't fire anybody. Right. All Doge can do is make recommendations. So when
Right.
it comes to firing, I hear people talk about Elon Musk fired. Elon Musk, in his capacity, um, cannot fire anybody. I mean, it's not entirely clear in a couple of court cases what his relationship is to Doge. Even um, he's not an employee of the U.S. Digital Service, but everybody should know that Elon Musk can't fire anybody. He does not
Hmm.
have that authority, but he can make recommendations to the Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Health and Human Services, and all that. They have to do the actual firing.
Sure.
Okay,
So,
so let me give you the last word on just the idea of
just a
principle.
couple things, just a couple things
Okay,
real
go ahead.
quick. I think what you're saying about Elon Musk's authority, that's true. Whether it is whether Doge is operating as an internal agency initiative or an advisory committee, either way, he doesn't have direct firing power, right? It has to go through
100%.
somebody else. But I think that you could make the case that he has the president's ear, certainly, right? And that he has some level of standing in this administration that would give him the power to, if he goes to the director of the treasury, the secretary of the treasury, and says, "Hey, me and the president want you to fire these people," right? That's probably going to happen. So. As far as principled resignations go, here's the concern that I have. What is the principle that is making them resign? And I think that in this case, we're not entirely clear, right? Now, if somebody is committed to the status quo, to maintaining things the way that they have been for the last number of years, and then Doge comes in and wants to shake everything to its foundations and make all these alterations and shine a flashlight on all this stuff, there might be some people who see that as a problem, right?
But I don't know why you're saying we don't know what their reason for quitting was.
Well, it seems like
They said
there are a
no,
lot
no.
of
They pointed basically to two. One is they feel that people are being harmed indiscriminately,
mhm,
and that actually makes that loss of expertise um, makes is damaging to the functioning of the government. That's
mhm,
primarily what that the U.S. Digital Service was designed to create. And the second thing, and this was a big concern, that they felt that makes that Doge's access makes America's data less secure, less
okay, well,
safe.
we've agreed on data security, right? I think that's
Okay.
where we left off on the last episode.
And so these are people who share they share your and my
Our
concern.
concerns, right?
Absolutely. So much so. And they're people on the inside. You and I
Mhm,
obviously aren't. And most anybody watching this isn't. Right? These are people who are inside, who are, according to their own characterization, they left senior private sector technology positions. So they're knowledgeable technology, um, and they're the ones who are giving up their job, a government job, voluntarily to
mhm.
go ahead and bring to light what's going on. And so it's not that we don't know why they did what they did. What we don't know is we don't know what party they belong to. You're right. We don't know if they're Democrats or Republicans. But in my experience, and again, I confess to being an institutionalist, I think most bureaucrats know what their responsibility is. They
Sure.
carry out the so in any case.
I
Sorry for interrupting. I
No,
didn't
it's
mean to.
okay. It's okay. Look, I don't think you're interrupting. I think you're clarifying. The thing is, I am not of the mind that Doge can do no wrong, right? Certainly am not. In fact, I had a conversation with my cousin Lisa over the last few days, and she talked about she works for a nonprofit that addresses a particular disease. Lymphangioliomyomatosis is the name of the disease. LAM, very rare disease. She works with a nonprofit organization in an attempt to produce treatment and care for people who have this disease because she suffers from it. And she talks about an executive order that came down recently that has created a communications blackout among medical researchers. And we talked about it. We talked it out, and she and her husband emailed me some information on it. And it's correct with all the stuff that's going on with the National Institute of Health and with the WHO and all this stuff. The freeze in communication has created a problem with regards to continuing to provide care for people who need it. Right? That's a problem. That's something that Doge could do better. And the reason that I bring that up is because I don't want you to think that I am blindly supporting this effort. My real problem is that I think that the effort that's being undertaken by Doge to pull corruption and fraud and waste out of the government is a good and positive effort for the American people, right? Unfortunately, because Trump is such a polarizing figure and because Musk has become such a polarizing figure, I think that what's beginning to happen is that many people in the Democratic Party are just reflexively pushing back against everything that Doge is doing, right? Because they see it as an extension of Trump's, you know, authority grab. Uh,
So you're working on the assumption that all these people who resigned are all
not
Democrats.
necessarily, not necessarily. Uh, what I'm saying is,
Because we know, I just want to clarify, because we know that the people who resigned in Mayor Adams case, they were conservatives.
right?
They
Well,
were conservatives.
they were Republicans, but to
They no,
understand,
these guys were conservatives. One clerked for Scalia. One of them clerked for
mhm,
Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh. These are hardcore conservatives. These are people who are members of the Federalist Society, right?
mhm.
These are not non-Trumpers. These are the people who were there at the beginning. These are people who were on board. And
I understand.
what they saw was so troubling. Um, and I get that you're not just going to rubber stamp everything that Trump does. My problem is this, Jubal, honestly, is that I think everybody's in favor of getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. I was recently looking at the size of the federal workforce. Um, and if you look at the size of the federal workforce right now, it's about the same number of people working in the federal government as were working in 1995. But if you look at a graph of the federal workforce, what you can see is from like the 1990s all the way through the Clinton administration, the federal workforce just went downhill, like in terms of numbers. That was Clinton and, quite frankly, the Republican Congress working together to reduce the size of government. I mean, also that happened also in the Bush administration as well. But they did it methodically. They did it methodically. At least some of the reports that I'm seeing, they're getting rid of programs by doing stupid shit like looking for anything that has the word diversity or looking for anything that has the word
Sure.
inclusion and getting rid of it. So to me, there's a way to get things done. There's a way to think. For me, if Doge does a deep dive and looks in and takes their time to analyze what's going on, they get properly trained, they analyze, they look for redundancies, they make recommendations to both the department and the various committees in Congress and say, this is what we found. I'm on board with that.
Right.
Waste, fraud, and abuse is not okay. Going ahead and empowering somebody or a group of people to go ahead and take a sledgehammer to things where they fire a bunch of people who are working on the avian flu and then need to hire them back again, or they fire people who are maintaining our nuclear arsenal and then have to try and rehire them again. This
Mhm.
is not efficiency. The idea that that's efficient seems to me to like put the definition of efficiency on its head.
I
And so,
understand. I don't necessarily disagree with you, right? And that's
okay,
that's my point in bringing up
okay,
Lisa and her trials with dealing with the communications blackout. My point is that two points, and let me try to make them as quickly as I can. The first is the binary that I think that you're talking about, as far as SDNY and as far as these particular employees of Doge are concerned. The binary that is pushing back against Donald Trump is not split along the lines of, oh, you got somebody.
go ahead.
That's all right.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. There you go.
That's one of
Okay.
the women, one of the people who helped take care of my mom,
There you go.
Karen. So she's
Because you're
her
such a
shift is
good
over.
son, right? You're such a good son. You got to make sure your mom's taken care of. So the binary regarding Donald Trump is not necessarily conservative progressive. It's not even necessarily Republican Democrat. It's insider outsider, right? Washington insider versus Washington outsider. And so there's some overlap there. And so just because somebody is a Republican doesn't mean they should automatically be on Trump's side or, vice versa. Uh, and that's why he's got such a colorful cabinet, right? He's got ex-Democrats on his cabinet. Anyway, my point is understand the binary that it's insider outsider. Now, because of that situation, that Trump is coming in and his whole plan is to disrupt, right? My thing is if Democrats, if the insiders, right, and especially Democrat insiders, were on board with this effort, they could help steer it. If Democrats were to make a concerted effort, if the people who are Washington insiders that are arrayed against Donald Trump because he's Donald Trump would just take a breath and recognize that this effort could be a very positive thing for the country. It just needs to be steered correctly. It needs it you need more wisdom at the table. So embrace the idea and get involved. Because
Because the
right now,
pro
if you leave it up to the Republicans, it seems like if you leave it up to the Trump administration, that he's swinging a sledgehammer around, right? Help him aim it.
and they addressed that in their letter, and they said we are not going to lend our expertise and provide credibility to Doge by lending our name and our expertise to it when what you're doing is damaging America's.
Right. And that seems to me to be terribly selfish.
And to me, that seems to be there. In political science, we talk about burglar alarms as sort of a way that people go ahead and notify something that how oversight happens. So the two metaphors that people use are the police patrol or the burglar alarm. That when something bad is going on, one way to capture bad things going on is you patrol the area, and then hopefully if you're fortunate, when you come across somebody doing something bad, you catch them in the act. The other form of oversight is what they refer to, the metaphor, as the burglar alarm. You pull an alarm to notify people
Mhm.
something's wrong. Um, Principled recognitions are a perfect example of um, burglar alarm sort of oversight. I don't want to conflate Doge and what's happening at DOJ, but when Danielle Sassoon resigns, when those other people resign, they're pulling an alarm. They're saying, we've been asked to do something that is violative of our oath of office.
Mhm.
We're being asked to do something that is, excuse me, against our code and our responsibilities as officers of the court. And so we're going to give up our jobs to go ahead and pull this alarm. We're going to let it be known. Doge is doing those people who resigned. Doge, they were on board. They were there. They were working. And as things got worse, so I think when somebody has a good idea and they go about it they go about it in a bad way, it can make it a bad thing. If I've got a doctor who wants to get rid of a brain tumor, that's a
Mhm.
good thing, and he walks in with with an axe, that's a bad thing.
Mhm.
Right? I want him to have a scalpel. I want anesthesia. And what they're doing is to me, I think, interestingly, destructive to their own goals. Um, but I think it's important to listen to the these burglar alarms being pulled.
I don't disagree, but I want to know more about what these folks are actually like, what the principles are that they feel have been violated.
Well, again,
Uh,
the letter states it quite clearly
okay,
that
all right.
that access that the data
If
is
it's
being
just a data
compromised.
security situation, because it's you said that they said two things
Two
that.
things: indiscriminate firing of people, so a reduction in expertise.
Mhm.
People who are experts, like again, people who left the private sector to come into the public sector to help
Mhm.
modernize our infrastructure, our technological infrastructure. That was the first thing. They felt that that loss of expertise is making it harder to make the government more efficient. And then second, the dangers of having people having access to these large data sets.
I
But
understand.
anyways,
In that
I think we've
situation, you have these people who have this expertise, and for them to just storm out,
they're not
they could still draw attention to the issue and say, look, there are things that need to be repaired, things that need to be altered. Why can't they get more specific about what particularly is going wrong?
I think that
Uh,
they're constrained on what they can say in a public setting.
okay, that might be true.
Right.
Then
Absolutely.
come out and say that. We would tell you more if we could, right?
Right.
But if
They may have said that in the letter. I don't
they
know.
may have, but it seems to me to stay in an unfriendly administration or an unfriendly office and to try to make it better from the inside is a more difficult thing,
This is
but
this
also
is
a
like
better thing.
this is fantasy land. When going back, we're jumping back and forth between Doge and the DOJ. Danielle Sassoon and the other people who resigned, there were a total of 8 of them.
Hmm.
They were asked to do something they thought was illegal or unconstitutional, and they
Hmm.
refused to carry out that order. Their resignation was asked for because they stood on principle. Danielle Sassoon was asked to resign because she wasn't on board with doing what she thought was an illegal.
So it wasn't a principled resignation. She was
Yeah,
asked
that
for.
was very no, she principally her principle was, I'm not going to do something that violates the law and violates the Constitution. I'm not going to do something that goes against the principles that I have to uphold as a lawyer
I
and as an
understand,
officer of the court. That is principle. I will not carry out an unlawful order.
but it wasn't a
That
resignation.
Well, she was asked to resign. So her options were to resign or be fired. So
Hmm.
she chose to resign instead. I find that to be very principled,
I feel like I feel like
especially
you're
when I'm
undermining your argument at this point.
no, I'm not undermining my argument. I'm not we've seen these principled resignations over and over again in Trump 1 and Trump 2 already. And the thing is that we know that there were lawyers who carried out the wishes and did things that were violative of their obligations to the court. Rudy
Okay.
Giuliani did it. Um, uh, Sidney Powell did it. Other people did it, and they were disbarred.
Hmm.
And these lawyers have to know that. We have to know that.
I'm all I want to say is that just because a person resigns on principle doesn't mean either that A, their principle is a principle that is rooted in reality, or B, that their understanding of what they consider to be violative of their principle is accurate. Now, that said, it's still it's still to me is as you say a burglar alarm, right? If people are resigning on principle and saying I don't want to be part of this because I think it's illegal, okay, well that deserves more scrutiny. So as a result of these 20 people leaving Doge, what scrutiny would you want to see?
I would like to see, which we won't say, I would like to see Congress bring them in and ask them what's going on.
Hmm.
Obviously, the Republican Congress is not going to do that. It's unrealistic to think that they're going to do that. I would like to see these people be put under oath to go ahead and talk and tell us what's going on.
Hmm.
Things that can't be said publicly, do it in a private setting. But I don't believe that Republicans are willing to stand up to Donald Trump. I don't think they're going to call him in. And in fairness, when the Democrats are in control of Congress, they're very loath to call in the administration,
Hmm.
a Democratic administration, to sort of rake them over the coals. So in a way, it's understandable. I just see one principled resignation is maybe noise, maybe a signal. Massive numbers of them. I mean, you
Hmm.
think about when in American history we've seen massive resignations like that. It happened during the Nixon
I
administration.
don't know if 20 is massive, but I take your point,
No,
right?
that's a lot of people resigning in mass, and we know that this is important because during the Bush administration, um,
Were they
the
asked
pro-
to resign, these 20?
I know Danielle Sassoon was. I
Right,
don't
but we're
know about
talking about Doge. Would any of the
Well,
Doge
I don't
people?
know if they were asked to resign or if they just said, "Fuck it, I'm not doing this.
Okay.
I'm not
So it
contributing to
sounds like we
this."
need more information before we can
Right,
make a
right.
determination of
Either
whether or
either
not this
way,
is.
either way, to me, the fact that they resigned and gave up a government job um, that they had left the private sector to join to help the U.S. become more
I
technologically efficient.
But
To
you
me,
said that these are technology experts who could be earning much more in the private sector. So what did they actually give up?
they gave up the job that they had,
Hmm.
and now I have no doubt that they're not going to wind up on the side of the freeway holding a work program for
Anything
food.
helps.
Right,
Anything
exactly.
helps.
Right, exactly. I'm not expecting to see them as I'm turning left onto
Right.
the freeway.
Right.
But
So
but
let's.
quitting a job like that is always uh, the big thing to do. I don't know how many
It
jobs you
it is, but let's
I don't
take
know
a
how many
sober
jobs you've
look at
done.
it. Let's just take a sober look at it and just say, okay, that
Okay,
this
so
happened. Well, let's
we'll
put a
let
pin
that.
in it. And we'll have to come back to it. And if it turns out that this was the canary in the coal mine, right? That this was the harbinger of what was going to happen, then you get to dance around and say, "I told you so," right? Right now, I'm not super convinced. I think it's worth more looking, but it's not a big flashing sign to me.
Okay, and
Because I
I encourage
because
you.
I think
Yeah.
that there's going to be a lot of people that this happens to. That's sort of the whole point of this Doge movement is they're going to be purging a lot of people from the rolls, right?
I encourage anybody who's watching this to go ahead and Google like Doge employees letter resignation
Hmm.
and read what they wrote in their letter. So let's go on because we don't want these to go on too long about the
Right.
other conflicts of interest. That's a concern that a lot of people have talked about is
Hmm.
that um, critics point out that Musk is the CEO of and major stakeholder in companies like Tesla, SpaceX, X Corp, all of which have significant government contracts. And his advisory role in Doge, because his actual role is a little bit unclear, could create a situation where the decisions that are being made or that they're recommending um, could favor his businesses. So, for
Hmm.
example, Doge is proposing to eliminate jobs at a vehicle safety agency that oversees his Tesla company and has actually launched investigations into car crashes um, involving Tesla. If he's going ahead and recommending layoffs in that part of that agency, does that represent a cause of concern for you? Or should Elon Musk be restrained or constrained, or could Doge be restrained from making recommendations that can affect either um, uh, Elon Musk's businesses or that of his competitors as well? What do you
I mean,
think?
that's that of course, right? And that's always a concern. And I think that both Musk and Trump have addressed this directly. I don't know. Did you watch the interview of Trump and Musk on Sean
I
Hannity?
saw snippets of it, but Trump basically said he doesn't think it's a problem. He
Right.
didn't.
So
There were no safeguards built
I
into
think
it. He
I think
certainly he. Go
they
ahead.
were both a little Pollyanna about their approach to conflicts of interest. Now, I'm I'm not a huge Sean Hannity fan. I don't think he's a particularly great interviewer. I think he likes to inject himself in the conversation way too much. But you did get a chance to listen to Trump and Musk talk about things that are important. And I think that you're right. I think that when asked about potential conflicts of interest, that what Musk said was, "Well, I'll just recuse myself if there's a conflict of interest." And Trump said, "Yeah, I mean, if there's something where he's going to be involved in a decision making process that involves his companies, he's just not going to take part in that." Now, what the other thing that Musk said was that he's under a tremendous amount of scrutiny, meaning all the things that he does and all the things that he is looking into as he's running this Doge project are transparent. And if you go to, again, doge.gov, you can see all the things that they're working on. I think that as far as conflicts of interest are concerned, really the proof is in the pudding in the sense that if it comes out that, the government decides to award Tesla a $100 billion contract at the recommendation of Doge, then okay, maybe there's an issue with that. But if he's going into an agency that's involved in, as you say, automobile safety, if his goal is to make it more efficient, then you could just as easily make the argument that he's actually working against his company interests, right? If he makes automotive safety regulation concerns more efficient and better able to execute their job, then he's going to be under a higher amount of scrutiny at Tesla. At Tesla, does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's like you're talking about Pollyannish. I mean, I think that is the
But if that's
idea
the
that
goal, if the goal is
that's.
to make the agency more effective,
I don't think that
then
that's the goal. It doesn't seem to me to be the goal. The goal is to simply reduce the size of the government. That's why they indiscriminately said all probationary employees were going to be let go.
mhm,
If you think about the idea of going ahead, if you have this, not you, the generic you, if you have the view that there's this deep state of
mm,
people who are entrenched in the bureaucracy, going ahead and getting rid of probationary employees not without looking at their performance reviews, because that's what the reports have said. They haven't looked at their performance reviews. They haven't had time to look at their performance reviews. To go ahead and just get rid of probationary employees, that's all the people who have been recently hired. And I
mhm,
actually know one of them, somebody who's been recently hired, and anybody who's got who's been given a promotion becomes a probationary employee who just unilaterally, just arbitrarily say we're going to get rid of pro- um, uh, um, all probationary employees, that there's nothing remotely efficient about that. The way you make something more efficient is to examine it.
mhm,
I don't know if I mentioned this before in these podcasts. I think Jubal and I have talked about this, but I saw the head of USAID during the Bush administration interviewed, and he was talking about the way they were going about it, the way Doge was going about it, and saying this was completely ass backwards. And what he said was when he came into USAID, um, there were a lot of programs that the Clinton administration had approved that he thought were terrible. The first thing he did is he sat down with his employees, with the people who worked for USAID, and they went over each one of those programs. And he got input from them. Which ones are a waste of time? Which ones are efficient? How should we go about eliminating them? And
Mhm.
he said that they were on board with what, their job is to carry out the views of the administration. If that's what Doge was doing, a careful analysis of these administrations. And I might be on board with the idea of doing that. I don't think our biggest problems are the size of the federal workforce, but just eliminating people, one, doesn't make it more efficient. It's like saying everybody whose last name starts with M, I'm going to get rid of. That's not a logical way to do it. And second, it means that the people who've been there the longest are the ones who are the deep state, who are the problem. They basically have more power because they're
Mhm.
the only holders of institutional knowledge. It looks to me, Jubal, and again, I'm sure you see this differently, that this is about grabbing headlines. This is not about efficiency. This is about being in the news cycle. If you were going to try and go about making the Department of Defense more efficient, if you yourself were doing it, I have more faith that you would be able to do that because I think you would be logical about it. You would
I
look at,
no, I do not. I do not. Here's the thing. There are a number of different constraints on this project, on the Doge project, and the not the smallest one is time, right? There's a limited window here where Doge can actually make things happen. The people have said that they wanted this.
why
They're
is
in
there limited?
because you've got one term, right? And actually they've put an end date on it. A year from July, I believe, is the end date of the Doge program. So this is not going to be a permanent facet of the government, right? Now, so they're coming in and they're looking to make broad cuts. Now you can take issue with that, and I understand taking issue with that. But to say I've heard now from a couple of different people, and I don't know if you've heard this or not, that less than 10% of the federal workforce actually works full time in an office building, like actually goes to work full time. Does that sound right to you?
I don't know. I know that there are, you mean the people who are working from
Of
home?
all the people who work for the federal government, less than 10% actually work in person full time.
I don't know. I doubt that that's the case because when you're thinking about
And
everyday
that's what I
person,
thought too. But
yeah,
I've been running into that statistic, and I want to know where that comes from.
yeah.
If that is the case, I think one of the first things, if you remember the email that went out, is tell me about the last five things you've done this week, right? That he got a lot of flack for that. Musk got a lot of flack for that. But that's sort of like a call response. Like that's a basic programming thing. Is when you send out a signal and you wait for a response back to see which nodes are live, right? Uh, a similar thing is the number of fraudulent Social Security numbers in the system, right? There's 310 million people in the United States that qualify for a Social Security number. There's 392 million active Social Security numbers, 395 million active Social Security numbers, right? Um, what's going on there? Like you're going to need you need a broad hammer to start getting at some of that, right?
Yeah, no, you
Like,
don't.
but you
You need a scalpel. You need to go ahead
no
and look
look.
into it because if you use a broad hammer, Jubal, you risk going ahead and cutting out somebody's social security benefits who actually deserves it.
I understand, but at the same
You need
time,
the idea of taking a sledgehammer to it. You're talking about taking a sledgehammer to people's livelihood.
the idea of a scalpel, I would agree with if either the Democrat or the Republican Party prior to this administration had taken the national debt seriously, right?
Again,
I don't think either side has taken the national debt seriously for the last 40 years.
I would agree with you on that, but there was an effort, bipartisan effort, as I said at the beginning of this, there was a bipartisan effort to go ahead and reduce the size of the federal government. It happened for the end of the Bush administration and then through the Clinton administration. And it was a work with Clinton and a Republican controlled Congress together. People didn't like each other very much, but they did it methodically.
They all had
They,
scalpels. And
they
then and spending year over year has gone up and up and up year over year.
right, right. So, which tells me that the size of the federal workforce is not what's causing our debt to go up.
So what is
It's
it?
Well, I mean, I think it's spending and not having enough money coming in, right?
Right.
There are a variety of things. But if you're going ahead and you're ostensibly trying to reduce the federal deficit and you're going after dumb things like foreign aid, which is like less than 1% of our budget, or you're trying to reduce the workforce when our budget, our deficit has gone up like this, and our federal workforce has increased like this.
I understand, but
It's
but
it, it's all
you know,
it's
the,
all
the
about.
the USAID argument to say that, oh, it's, what is it, $60 billion, it's only 1% of the budget. Yeah, that's right, and it's only been 3 weeks, right? So if we can do 1% of the budget every 2 or 3 weeks, that's pretty good. So let's put it in perspective, right?
But the
The
programs that they're eliminating it was barbaric to get rid of some of those programs.
some
Pep,
maybe some you
PEPFAR that President Bush was
mhm.
responsible for getting going. Um, People I've heard estimates that program has saved 25 million lives. Right, program trying to contain Ebola. Right, that protects us. That's foreign aid, but it's
This
foreign aid. People talk about foreign aid as if foreign aid is something we just give to other countries. But
mhm,
like food that we disperse to other countries, they're paid. It's our farmers who grow that food.
mhm.
And then the government buys it from our farmers. And then we ship them abroad. So this isn't just money being given away.
Well,
But
that's
they're going about it. They're going about it with a sledgehammer, and I think they're damaging U.S. national interests. And they've already had to come back and try and fix the things that they fucked up.
Yeah, that's right, Musk has been open about that. He said, we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to try to fix them quickly. So
But those mistakes didn't have to happen. They're being mismade because
okay,
they're being irresponsible.
okay, if they're being irresponsible, then it is the responsibility of the responsible party, the Democratic Party, to sit at the table and be part of this, rather than just throw rocks at it, right?
If the Democratic Party has very little power in the House for sure, and the Senate they have even less. But it's amazing to me that what you're saying is that Republicans control the White House, the House, and the Senate. And it's the Democrats' responsibility that Doge is going about attacking the federal workforce in a completely irresponsible manner.
Responsibility,
I would
maybe
I would say the
responsibility might not be
opposite.
the right word, but certainly
I
the
would say
principle
I
should
would say
be.
the opposite is true. It is up to the Republicans in Congress to say, "Pull your jets. We
Mhm.
need to do this. We're on board with what you're trying to do. We want to reduce the federal workforce. Now we control Congress and the White House.
Mhm.
Let's set about doing this responsibly.
Okay.
Let's do this in a way that isn't cruel and unnecessarily hurtful."
Let me back it up, because I do think that we're butting heads on something where we're probably not going to gain any ground. It's sort of a corporate mentality versus a government mentality versus an institution mentality. I think that your mentality is that, look, you don't want to get rid of institutional knowledge, right? So the people who actually understand how these agencies function, the last thing you want to do is be kicking them out the door, because then you don't have anybody that can do the jobs that need to be done, right? My point of view is I'm looking at this as more of an urgent corporate concern, in the sense that America at this point is almost $40 trillion in debt. And the bill comes due on that. We're spending a tremendous amount of money just on interest and service to that debt. And I think a lot of people don't understand that having that much debt out there, having that much national debt, um, makes everything in your life more expensive, right? Because there's competition. When you have all these bonds going out, all these I don't want to get too into the financial weeds on it, but let's just say we would all be much better off if this debt was paid down, right? If we actually had a plan to get rid of this debt, we would all find ourselves to be much better off. And so I think that's the urgency involved here. There are people who are concerned that once the United States hits a certain level, 45 to $50 trillion in debt, that our bond rating goes down, and at
Right.
that point, the dollar is no longer the U.S. current or the world currency.
But then,
And
Jubal, as you said, as we talked about before,
mhm,
the increase in the national debt is not been caused by the growth of the federal workforce. The federal workforce is actually smaller today than it was in 1990, substantially smaller than it was in
I
1990. And so that can't be the driver. So why go after the federal workforce in an arbitrary manner if not just to generate headlines?
I
And
think that
there's an indifference also to like sort of suffering that I find problematic as well.
okay.
It just arbitrary.
The
So, anyways, I think you're right. We can't go in there, but at least I hope we've laid out for people where the cleavage is, where the divide is. For me, and Jubal and I have talked about this a bunch of times. Um, I'm an institutionalist. I tend to have faith in the institutions that they work. One of the things I always tell my students is that the great thing about our political system is change happens incrementally. The bad thing about our political system is that change happens incrementally. It's like a double-edged sword,
right.
and finding that balance is important. But when people are going at a problem, serious problem like national debt, which I'm on board with, reducing national debt, but they're going at it in an arbitrary way and in a way that doesn't increase efficiency, that no business would approach it the same the way that they're doing this.
Well,
None,
I don't think that that's accurate.
yeah,
Uh,
I don't think that anybody would just come in and arbitrarily go ahead and reduce a workforce without looking into
uh,
who can should be replaced and who shouldn't be replaced. Who
I'll tell you
shouldn't.
what. I'll tell you what. Efficiency consultants come into corporations, and that's one of their core jobs is you need to find 20% of the workforce to fire, right?
No,
Uh,
no question about it. What do they? How do they go about it? Do they do it in a week?
Sometimes.
I think for the most part they don't, Jubal. What they
Okay,
want to do is they want to actually make things more efficient.
I
They want to
understand.
get. You need to find redundancies. You need to find people who aren't producing all those things.
I don't want to just be contrarian, right? I don't want to just say, yeah, they do. Here's the thing. Again, the time urgency for Republicans is a much bigger deal than it is for Democrats right now, right? So of course, Democrats are saying, "Oh, use a scalpel," because Democrats know if Doge is not successful, that's going to shine bad on this administration. That's the truth, right? So slow down, take things easy. If this effort turns out to be remarkably successful, if they're actually able to carve out, let's say, $1 trillion total over the course of the project in spending, let's just say they're able to find that much. I mean, look at the just the Social Security numbers. I mean, we could throw some math around on those, but if they're able to come up with a significant amount of spending in the government and reduce it by that much, that will be a big win for this administration. You're saying they're looking for headlines? Maybe you're right. Maybe they are looking for headlines. The question to ask though is not whether or not they should be looking for headlines, but whether or not they can actually make a dent. And I think that they can. Now, let's agree on two things. There's two things I think that we've come to in this conversation that are worth thinking about and that are worth people knowing about. The first is uh, the thing that we talked about today, Elon Musk and his conflicts of interest. I don't think that they have been especially forthcoming in what the safeguards are there to ensure that no weirdness happens. And I think they could do a better job with saying, here maybe are the people involved directly in watching over this situation to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest, right? Here are the processes that we use to make sure that Elon Musk's competitors or that Elon Musk's companies don't have an unfair advantage or disadvantage. I think that it wouldn't take long for them to do that, to put that out there, and I think that would assuage a lot of people's concerns. The second thing is data security, and that's something that we agreed on in the last episode. There's no doubt that the data, the integrity of our national data security needs to be taken seriously. So if we're going to have a problem with either one of those things, I don't think it's enough to just say that they are concerns and then that's a stoppage point. I think you have to show something happening, right? Is there a data leak? Is there somebody coming out and saying our data is being siphoned off or stolen? Is there somebody coming out and saying, hey, Elon Musk is, pumping $1 billion into Tesla? You've got to do more than just be concerned, for in my estimation at this point. But I do think that the Doge program could be more forthcoming in those two areas and explain a little bit better what they're actually doing to make those two things not a concern. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I'll make a prediction here. I don't think they will be more transparent. I don't think they'll do it. That's not, I think, either Elon Musk or Donald Trump's MO. Transparency is not, I think, either a value for them in particular. I know he says that if we're going to make mistakes and all that. What he didn't address is why they made mistakes. That was my concern. Why
Mhm.
did you make a mistake? Did you make a mistake because you don't know what you're doing?
I think
And
faulting.
if you missed a mistake as obvious as canceling an Ebola program, what mistakes have you made that you don't know about? And it's
Mhm.
because he's going about it irresponsibly. So I agree with you. I would love to see a clear delineation uh, uh, of requirements about what Doge can and can't recommend in regards to Elon Musk's businesses. He should neither benefit nor should he be harmed
Mhm.
by Doge. They shouldn't go after Elon Musk, and he shouldn't benefit. It should be objective. But it's important not only to get rid of any conflicts of interest, but this is really important. It's important that there not be the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Mhm.
That's important as well. So I agree with you. I would like to see more transparency and more guidelines given to Doge in regards to Musk. I will make a prediction. That's not going to happen. Okay. And if I'm wrong, you can dance around like you were saying. If I
Yeah,
was
you
wrong,
know what? I'm actually gonna make the opposite prediction. I think that they will
okay.
start releasing more information about the safeguards that they have. Because here's the thing, I don't think that faulting them for a lack of transparency is a good way to go on this issue, because the Doge program is all about transparency.
But they're not being transparent.
I I
They're
th- they're doing
that's what
pretty damn good, I think. You-
in the court case that this judge ruled on. The reason he's requiring the administration to bring people in under oath, because in his estimation, he can't tell. He's trying to deal with this lawsuit from these labor unions and stuff like that, employees associations. He can't tell what those is or isn't doing because as a judge, he doesn't have that information. And so that's why
I
he's requiring them to come in and put people under oath so that
Sure.
what they say has. So I can tell you that a judge who's trying to adjudicate some of these cases feels that they aren't being transparent enough to him to reasonably make a decision in this case.
Okay, I look forward to seeing more there, but we've already determined that Doge doesn't have the power to actually enact any of these changes.
So I think his concern is exactly what you had talked about. Said if what they're doing is if what they're going about and doing, and this gets back to the Administrative Procedures Act, is if they're making recommendations that are arbitrary and capricious, that's the legal standard, that you're not allowed to get rid of people arbitrarily or capriciously. If they're making recommendations, but their recommendations are both arbitrary and capricious, and if, as you suggest, because of the influence that Donald Musk has, department heads
Did
are
you say Donald
viewing
Musk?
Elon
Mhm.
Musk and Donald Trump have, that if department heads are viewing that as essentially an order from Donald Trump, then I think the judge at that point would be able to do something. Now, like in many of these things, we're gonna have to wait to see how these
We are
court
going to have to wait
cases.
to see. I would say this one thing about Elon Musk. I don't think that anything that that dude does is arbitrary or capricious. Now, you could say that he's not using the right standards. For instance, coming in and firing all temporary employees. Maybe that's not a good enough standard for you, but I guarantee you, he's working off a data set, a large data set, and they're looking for columns and rows that match up with dollar amounts. Now that may not be the most human way of looking at things, but it is quick and it is efficient in the sense that you can address significant problems very quickly
I
if you
I
analyze from that standpoint.
I don't think it's efficient. You have to know how these departments work in order to get things done, and that's why I would encourage everybody go look up the interview for the USAID former head, and what he did when he came into office.
Mhm.
He didn't do it arbitrary and capriciously. He didn't fire anybody because he found that the people working in the administration were people who took their job seriously and wanted to implement whoever was in office, implement their program. He took a full month. He was looking at one relatively small agency, and he took a month to examine it and get
I
input
am,
from the
and
employees.
I suppose that's the whole problem, right? Is that if every time you want to make a change, you need to form a committee and take a month and discuss it and
A
wait for
month is not a
complaints.
long time.
It is when you're talking about you only have what, 18 months,
Okay. I
right?
just want to say, and then we have to stop because the sun is starting to bleach me out. This isn't me getting angry, you guys. I'm not. Oh, I have to stop using my hands apparently. Um, that's for Lisa. Lisa, I hope you're paying attention. I listen to you. I can't help it. Um, that using an arbitrary standard is not efficient. I'm just glad that the courts are stepping in and slowing this down and hopefully requiring people to go ahead and adhere
I'm glad the
to the
courts are
law.
stepping in, not because the I want them to slow the efforts down. I think if anything, the efforts can pick up speed as more people get on board. But more transparency is always good. I'm gonna say that that's my standard. More transparency is always good. The two problems that I have with Doge right now are a lack of transparency with regards to data security on actual processes of protecting data, and a lack of transparency on how you're combating the potential conflicts of interest. If Doge was to come out with statements that address those two issues, then I wouldn't see what the problem is.
And
And
I
I'll
would,
I'll give you
I
the
would,
last word.
I will add a third thing is that they need to be transparent in terms of determining, explaining how they're deciding the people who are getting fired are being selected. And if it's something as dumb as everybody who's a probationary employee is automatically fired, they should be public about that so that people have an opportunity to understand just how completely stupid that is. So I hope they're transparent about that as well. I don't anticipate it, but we've already got a bet. And if you guys want to, after watching this, you can weigh in on your bet. But don't
Right.
bet with us. We're just going to bet among ourselves.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. And okay, so that's going to be, we may come back to Doge. We may talk more about Doge later as things unfold. I'm sure that we will. I'm sure that there's going to be more information that comes out, but that'll put a pin in it for now. The next time we get together, we're going to take a back step and we're going to talk about all the things that we've talked about so far. We're going to get a little bit more conceptual about authoritarian. I don't think we've even said the word authoritarian today, although that has been, the main idea of all of these videos. And we're going to see if we can come up with a little bit better definition of what that means and sort of how to ferret it out. Maybe we can have some more measures of whether or not an administration is authoritarian, whether or not something like this program counts as authoritarian. That's going
Right.
to be next time.
And then next time I'll try and be in a different location. So this whole thing with the sun
Yeah,
isn't
you look like
happening.
you're in the center of the sun. Thanks everybody for
Yeah.
joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
And don't forget, if you want to make comments, if you have suggestions for how we can improve things, do it better, or have topics that you would like to see us address, put it in the comments. Okay.
Yep.
Take care, everyone.
Look forward to hearing from you. Take care.